Big Magic Creative Living Beyond Fear, published in 2015, is a self-help book of 186 pages broken down into 6 sections: courage, enchantment, permission, persistence, trust, and divinity. It was published at Editions Riverhead Books, New York, an imprint of Penguin Random House LLC. Elizabeth Gilbert, born July 18, 1969, is an American journalist and author. She is best known for her 2006 memoir, Eat, Pray, Love, which has sold over 12 million copies and has been translated into over 30 languages. The book has been also bestseller for 3 years. And it was made into a film of the same name in 2010, played by Julia Roberts.
She defined creativity as the relationship between a human being and the mysteries of inspiration. In this book, Elizabeth is talking about big magic, creativity, fear, ideas, courage, inspiration, permission, persistence, hard work, and also motives to create. Creativity is inner in all of us, it is in our DNA, we are all creative living. It is not a privilege of some people and not others. It's in the human being. So everybody has a creative treasure inside him, if it is about art, writing, harvesting, building, cooking, designing. Everything can be creative. Everybody has a treasure hidden inside them and need to be bring forth and worked on. That's creative living. However, creativity needs courage. You have to stand up for yourself and defend it from your thoughts or any other source that is trying to discourage you from your mission, your creative living. She talked about affirmations that she is always repeating in order to remind herself, her doubts and her negative thoughts, that she is a writer. She distinguishes 2 different methods of creating as a writer: inspiration or big magic, and hard work. Inspiration is called also muse, genius, fairy dust. That's when you have that high moment of inspiration and you start to write pages of a story without interruption. Unfortunately, this can't be all the time scenario, so you should get to work without inspiration but with hard work, stubbornness, and discipline. Ideas are living creatures that come and go and can also get in touch with several people at the same time. It's multiple discovery. Ideas should be seized such an opportunity and get worked on seriously and constantly, otherwise they will go see someone else who is ready to work on it.
Creativity. Q. What is creativity? A. the relationship between a human being and the mysteries of inspiration. What is creative living? And why? The universe buries strange jewels deep within us all, and then stands back to see if we can find them. The hunt to uncover those jewels, that's creative living. The courage to go on that hunt in the first place, that's what separates a mundane existence from a more enchanted one. The often surprising results of that hunt, that's what I call big magic. When I refer to creative living, I am speaking more broadly. I'm talking about living a life that is driven more strongly by curiosity than by fear. Why creative living? And while the paths and outcomes of creative living will vary wildly from person to person, I can guarantee you this: a creative life is an amplified life. It's a bigger life, a happier life, an expanded life, and a hell of a lot more interesting life. Living in this manner continually and stubbornly bringing forth the jewels that are hidden within you, is a fine art, in and of itself. Because creative living is where big magic will always abide. Because creative living is a path for the brave. We all know this. And we all know that when courage dies, creativity dies with it. We all know that fear is a desolate boneyard where our dreams go to desiccate in the hot sun. This is common knowledge. Examples of creative living. My friend Susan's story. Susan turned 40. She was listless. She was restless. She felt drab and heavy. She did a little soul searching, the way one does on the big birthdays. She asked herself when was the last time she'd felt truly light, joyous, and yes, creative in her own skin. To her shock, she realized that it had been decades since she'd felt that way. The last time she'd experienced such feelings had been as a teenager, back when she was still figure skating. She was appalled to discover that she had denied herself this life-affirming pursuit for so long, and she was curious to see if she still loved it. 3 mornings a week, Susan awoke before dawn and, in that groggy hour before her demanding day job began, she skated. And she skated and skated and skated. And yes, she loved it, as much as ever. She loved it even more than ever, perhaps, because now, as an adult, she finally had the perspective to appreciate the value of her own joy. The poet Jack Gilbert's story and his advice. Once upon a time, there was a man named Jack Gilbert. Jack Gilbert was a great poet, but if you've never heard of him, don't worry about it. It's not your fault. He never much cared about being known. Jack could have been famous, but he wasn't into it. He had the talent and the charisma for fame, but he never had the interest. His first collection, published in 1962, won the prestigious Yale Younger Poets Prize and was nominated for the Pulitzer. What's more, he won over audiences as well as critics, which is not an easy feat for a poet in the modern world. He was photographed for Vogue, looking gorgeous and romantic. People were crazy about him. He could have been a rock star. Instead, he disappeared. He didn't want to be distracted by too much commotion. Later in life he reported that he had found his fame boring not because it was immoral or corrupting, but simply because it was exactly the same thing every day. He was looking for something richer, more textured, more varied. So he dropped out. He went to live in Europe and stayed there for 20 years. He lived for a while in Italy, a while in Denmark, but mostly he lived in a shepherd's hut on a mountaintop in Greece. There, he contemplated the eternal mysteries, watched the light change, and wrote his poems in private. After 2 decades, Jack Gilbert resurfaced and published another collection of poems. Again, the literary world fell in love with him. Again, he could have been famous. Again, he disappeared, this time for a decade. This would be his pattern always: isolation, followed by the publication of something sublime, followed by more isolation. He was like a rare orchid, with blooms separated by many years. He never promoted himself in the least. In one of the few interviews he ever gave, Gilbert was asked how he thought his detachment from the publishing world had affected his career. He laughed and said, "I suppose it's been fatal." Gilbert's students told me he was the most extraordinary man they'd ever encountered. He had seemed not quite of this world, they said. He seemed to live in a state of uninterrupted marvel, and he encouraged them to do the same. He didn't so much teach them how to write poetry, they said, but why? Because of delight. Because of stubborn gladness. He told them that they must live their most creative lives as a means of fighting back against the ruthless furnace of this world. Most of all, though, he asked his students to be brave. Without bravery, he instructed, they would never be able to realize the vaulting scope of their own capacities. Without bravery, they would never know the world as richly as it longs to be known. Without bravery, their lives would remain small, far smaller than they probably wanted their lives to be aside. Fear. Over the years, I've often wondered what finally made me stop playing the role of pitiful pearl, almost overnight. Surely there were many factors involved in that evolution, the tough mom factor, the growing up factor, but mostly I think it was just this: I finally realized that my fear was boring. My fear was a song with only one note, only one word, actually, and that word was stop. My fear never had anything more interesting or subtle to offer than that one emphatic word. Repeated at full volume on an endless loop, stop, 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 stop. Which means that my fear always made predictably boring decisions, like a choose-your-own-ending book that always had the same ending. Nothingness. Let me list for you some of the many ways in which you might be afraid to live a more creative life. You're afraid you have no talent. You're afraid you will be rejected or criticized or ridiculed. Or misunderstood, or worst of all, ignored. You're afraid there's no market for your creativity, and therefore no point in pursuing it. You're afraid somebody else already did it better. You're afraid everybody else already did it better. You're afraid somebody will steal your ideas, so it's safer to keep them hidden forever in the dark. You're afraid you won't be taken seriously. You're afraid you don't have the right kind of workspace, or financial freedom, or empty hours in which to focus on invention or exploration. You're afraid you don't have the right kind of training or degree. You're afraid you're too fat. I don't know what this has to do with creativity, exactly, but experience has taught me that most of us are afraid we're too fat, so let's just put that on the anxiety list, for good measure. You're afraid of being exposed as a hack, or a fool, or a dilettante, or a narcissist. You don't need your fear when it comes to creativity, of course, doesn't mean your fear won't show up. Trust me, your fear will always show up. Especially when you're trying to be inventive or innovative. Your fear will always be triggered by your creativity, because creativity asks you to enter into realms of uncertain outcome, and fear hates uncertain outcome. Your fear programmed by evolution to be hypervigilant and insanely overprotective. If you can't learn to travel comfortably alongside your fear, then you'll never be able to go anywhere interesting or do anything interesting. And that would be a pity, because your life is short and rare. And amazing and miraculous, and you want to do really interesting things and make really interesting things while you're still here. I know that's what you want for yourself, because that's what I want for myself, too. It's what we all want. Entitlement. What keeps you from creative living is your self-absorption, your self-doubt, your self-disgust, your self-judgment, your crushing sense of self-protection. The arrogance of belonging pulls you out of the darkest depths of self-hatred, not by saying I am the greatest, but merely by saying I am here. I believe that this good kind of arrogance, this simple entitlement to exist, and therefore to express yourself, is the only weapon with which to combat the nasty dialogue that may automatically arise within your head whenever you get an artistic impulse. You know the nasty dialogue I mean, right? I'm talking about the nasty dialogue that goes like this: who the hell do you think you are, trying to be creative? You suck, you're stupid, you have no talent, and you serve no purpose. Get back in your hole. For heaven's sake, at least defend yourself. Defending yourself as a creative person begins by defining yourself. It begins when you declare your intent. Stand up tall and say it aloud, whatever it is. I'm a writer. I'm a singer. I'm an actor. I'm a gardener. I'm a dancer. I'm an inventor. I'm a photographer. I'm a chef. I'm a designer. I am this, and I am that, and I am also this other thing, too. I don't yet know exactly what I am, but I'm curious enough to go find out. Speak it. Let it know you're there. Hell, let you know you're there, because this statement of intent is just as much an announcement to yourself as it is an announcement to the universe or anybody else. I've had to keep defining and defending myself as a writer every single day of my adult life, constantly reminding and re-reminding my soul and the cosmos that I'm very serious about the business of creative living, and that I will never stop creating, no matter what the outcome, and no matter how deep my anxieties and insecurities may be. Permission. It has never occurred to me to go ask an authority figure for permission to become a writer. I'd never seen anybody in my family ask anyone for permission to do anything. They just made stuff. So that's what I decided to do. I decided to just go make stuff. You do not need anybody's permission to live a creative life. Go back far enough and you will find people who were not consumers, people who were not sitting around passively waiting for stuff to happen to them. You will find people who spent their lives making things. This is where you come from. This is where we all come from. All of which is to say, you do not need a permission slip from the principal's office to live a creative life. Or if you do worry that you need a permission slip there, I just gave it to you. I just wrote it on the back of an old shopping list. Consider yourself fully accredited. Now go make something. Perfection. The great American novelist Robert Stone once joked that he possessed the two worst qualities imaginable in a writer: he was lazy, and he was a perfectionist. Indeed, those are the essential ingredients for torpor and misery. If you want to live a contented creative life, you do not want to cultivate either one of those traits, trust me. What you want is to cultivate quite the opposite. You must learn how to become a deeply disciplined half-ass. It starts by forgetting about perfect. We don't have time for perfect. In any event, perfection is unachievable. It's a myth and a trap and a hamster wheel that will run you to death. The writer Rebecca Solid puts it well: so many of us believe in perfection, which ruins everything else, because the perfect is not only the enemy of the good, it's also the enemy of the realistic, the possible, and the fun. Perfectionism stops people from completing their work. Yes, but even worse, it often stops people from beginning their work. Perfectionists often decide in advance that the end product is never going to be satisfactory, so they don't even bother trying to be creative in the first place. No matter how many hours you spend attempting to render something flawless, somebody will always be able to find fault with it. There are people out there who still consider Beethoven's symphonies a little bit too, loud. At some point, you really just have to finish your work and release it as if only so that you can go on to make other things with a glad and determined heart. Which is the entire point, or should be. Creativity for paying bills. I've seen artists drive themselves broke and crazy because of this insistence that they are not legitimate creators unless they can exclusively live off their creativity. And when their creativity fails them, meaning, doesn't pay the rent, they descend into resentment, anxiety, or even bankruptcy. Worst of all, they often quit creating at all. There is a profound sense of honor to be found in looking after yourself, and that honor will resonate powerfully in your work. It will make your work stronger. You can always make your art on the side of your bread and butter job. That's what I did for 3 whole books, and if it hadn't been for the bananas success of Eat, Pray, Love, that's what I'd still be doing now. That's what Toni Morrison did when she used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning in order to work on her novels before going off to her real-life career in the publishing world. That's what J.K. Rowling did back when she was an impoverished single mother, struggling to get by and writing on the side. That's what my friend Ann Patchett did back when she worked as a waitress at TGI Fridays and wrote in her spare hours. That's what a busy married couple I know does, both of them illustrators, both of them with full-time jobs, when, every morning, they rise a full hour before their children awake to sit across from each other in their small studio space and quietly draw. People don't do this kind of thing because they have all kinds of extra time and energy for it. They do this kind of thing because their creativity matters to them enough that they are willing to make all kinds of extra sacrifices for it. Unless you come from landed gentry, that's what everyone does. Complaining. There are so many good reasons to stop complaining if you want to live a more creative life. You are scaring away inspiration. Every time you express a complaint about how difficult and tiresome it is to be creative, inspiration takes another step away from you, offended. It's almost like inspiration puts up its hands and says, "Hey, sorry, buddy. I didn't realize my presence was such a drag. I'll take my business elsewhere." I have felt this phenomenon in my own life. Whenever I start complaining, I have felt the way my self-pity slams the door on inspiration, making the room feel suddenly cold, small, and empty. That being the case, I took this path as a young person. I even dared to say this aloud. I told the universe, and anyone who would listen, that I was committed to living a creative life, not in order to save the world, not as an act of protest, not to become famous, not to gain entrance to the canon, not to challenge the system, not to show the bastards, not to prove to my family that I was worthy, not as a form of deep therapeutic emotional catharsis, but simply because I liked it. Pain for creativity. Here's the painter Francis Bacon: the feelings of desperation and unhappiness are more useful to an artist than the feeling of contentment, because desperation and unhappiness stretch your whole sensibility. Actors do it, dancers do it, and musicians most certainly do it. Rufus Wainwright once admitted that he was terrified to settle down into a happy relationship, because without the emotional drama that came from all those dysfunctional love affairs, he was afraid of losing access to that dark lake of pain he felt was so critical to his music. And let's not even get started on the poets. Suffice it to say that the modern language of creativity, from its youngest aspirants up to its acknowledged masters, is steeped in pain, desolation, and dysfunction. Numberless artists toil away in total emotional and physical solitude, disassociated not only from other humans, but also from the source of creativity itself. Trusting in nothing but suffering is a dangerous path, though. I believe you can live a creative life and still make an effort to be a basically decent person. I'm with the British psychoanalyst Adam Phillips on this point, when he observes, if the art legitimates cruelty, I think the art is not worth having. I've never been attracted to the icon of the tormented artist, not even during adolescence, when that figure can seem particularly sexy and alluring to romantic-minded girls like me. It never appealed to me then, though, and it still doesn't appeal to me now. What I've seen already of pain is plenty, thank you, and I do not raise my hand and ask for more of it. I've also been around enough mentally ill people to know better than to sentimentalize madness. Go be whomever you want to be, then. Do whatever you want to do. Pursue whatever fascinates you and brings you to life. Create whatever you want to create and let it be stupendously imperfect, because it's exceedingly likely that nobody will even notice. And that's awesome. Lightness. Tom Waits went on a whimsical rant about all the different forms that song ideas will take, when they're trying to be born. Some songs, he said, will come to him with an almost absurd ease, like dreams taken through a straw. Other songs, though, he has to work hard for, like digging potatoes out of the ground. Still other songs are sticky and weird, like gum found under an old table, while some songs are like wild birds that he must come at sideways, sneaking up on them gently so as not to scare them into flight. The most difficult and petulant songs, though, will only respond to a firm hand and an authoritative voice. There are songs, Waits says, that simply will not allow themselves to be born, and that will hold up the recording of an entire album. Over the years, Tom Waits finally found his sense of permission to deal with his creativity more lightly without so much drama, without so much fear. A lot of this lightness, Waits said, came from watching his children grow up and seeing their total freedom of creative expression. He noticed that his children felt fully entitled to make up songs all the time, and when they were done with them, they would toss them out like little origami things, or paper airplanes. Then they would sing the next song that came through the channel. They never seemed to worry that the flow of ideas would dry up. They never stressed about their creativity, and they never competed against themselves, they merely lived within their inspiration, comfortably and unquestioningly. What you produce is not necessarily always sacred, I realized, just because you think it's sacred. What is sacred is the time that you spend working on the project, and what that time does to expand your imagination, and what that expanded imagination does to transform your life. The more lightly you can pass that time, the brighter your existence becomes. Curiosity. I believe that curiosity is the secret. Curiosity is the truth and the way of creative living. Curiosity is the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end. Furthermore, curiosity is accessible to everyone. Passion can seem intimidatingly out of reach at times, a distant tower of flame, accessible only to geniuses and to those who are specially touched by God. But curiosity is a milder, quieter, more welcoming, and more democratic entity. The stakes of curiosity are also far lower than the stakes of passion. Passion makes you get divorced and sell all your possessions and shave your head and move to Nepal. Curiosity doesn't ask nearly so much of you. In fact, curiosity only ever asks one simple question: is there anything you're interested in? Anything? Even a tiny bit? No matter how mundane or small. The answer need not set your life on fire. My search for more information about botanical exploration eventually led me around the planet, from my backyard in New Jersey to the horticultural libraries of England, from the horticultural libraries of England to the medieval pharmaceutical gardens of Holland, from the medieval pharmaceutical gardens of Holland to the moss-covered caves of French Polynesia. Three years of research and travel and investigation later, I finally sat down to begin writing the signature of all things, a novel about a fictional family of 19th-century botanical explorers. It was a novel I never saw coming. It had started with nearly nothing. I did not leap into that book with my hair on fire, I inched toward it, clue by clue. But by the time I looked up from my scavenger hunt and began to write, I was completely consumed with passion about 19th-century botanical exploration. 3 years earlier, I had never even heard of 19th-century botanical exploration. All I'd wanted was a modest garden in my backyard, but now I was writing a massive story about plants, and science, and evolution, and abolition, and love, and loss, and one woman's journey into intellectual transcendence. So it worked. But it only worked because I said yes to every single tiny clue of curiosity that I had noticed around me. Trust. I don't ever choose to believe that I've been completely abandoned in the creative wilderness, or that there's reason for me to panic about my writing. I choose to trust that inspiration is always nearby, the whole time I'm working, trying its damnedest to impart assistance. Inspiration is always trying to work with me. So I sit there and I work, too. That's the deal. I trust it, it trusts me. Hard work and stubbornness. For my own part, I decided early on to focus on my devotion to the work above all. That would be how I measured my worth. I knew that conventional success would depend upon 3 factors: talent, luck, and discipline, and I knew that 2 of those 3 things would never be under my control. Genetic randomness had already determined how much talent I'd been allotted, and destiny's randomness would account for my share of luck. The only piece I had any control over was my discipline. Recognizing that, it seemed like the best plan would be to work my ass off. That was the only card I had to play, so I played it hard. Mind you, hard work guarantees nothing in realms of creativity. Nothing guarantees anything in realms of creativity. But I cannot help but think that devotional discipline is the best approach. Do what you love to do, and do it with both seriousness and lightness. At least then you will know that you have tried and that whatever the outcome you have traveled a noble path. My single greatest expression of stubborn gladness has been the endurance of that trust. A particularly elegant commentary on this instinct came from the Nobel laureate Seamus Heaney, who said that when one is learning how to write poetry one should not expect it to be immediately good. The aspiring poet is constantly lowering a bucket only halfway down a well, coming up time and again with nothing but empty air. The frustration is immense. But you must keep doing it, anyway. After many years of practice, Heaney explained, the chain draws unexpectedly tight and you have dipped into waters that will continue to entice you back. You'll have broken the skin on the pool of yourself. I was no stranger to disappointment and frustration. But I remember thinking that learning how to endure your disappointment and frustration is part of the job of a creative person. If you want to be an artist of any sort, it seemed to me, then handling your frustration is a fundamental aspect of the work, perhaps the single most fundamental aspect of the work. Frustration is not an interruption of your process, frustration is the process. The fun part, the part where it doesn't feel like work at all, is when you're actually creating something wonderful, and everything's going great, and everyone loves it, and you're flying high. But such instants are rare. You don't just get to leap from bright moment to bright moment. How you manage yourself between those bright moments, when things aren't going so great, is a measure of how devoted you are to your vocation, and how equipped you are for the weird demands of creative living. Holding yourself together through all the phases of creation is where the real work lies. Persistence. I wasn't going anywhere. Whenever I got those rejection letters, then, I would permit my ego to say aloud to whoever had signed it, "You think you can scare me off? I've got another 80 years to wear you down. There are people who haven't even been born yet who are gonna reject me someday, that's how long I plan to stick around." Then I would put the letter away and get back to work. It didn't matter. No way was I going to give up on my work simply because it wasn't working. That wasn't the point of it. The rewards could not come from the external results, I knew that. The rewards had to come from the joy of puzzling out the work itself, and from the private awareness I held that I had chosen a devotional path and I was being true to it. If someday I got lucky enough to be paid for my work, that would be great, but in the meantime, money could always come from other places. There are so many ways in this world to make a good enough living, and I tried lots of them, and I always got by well enough. I was happy. I was a total nobody, and I was happy. I saved my earnings and went on trips and took notes. I kept working. I kept writing. I kept not getting published, but that was okay, because I was getting educated. The most important benefit of my years of disciplined, solitary work was that I began to recognize the emotional patterns of creativity, or, rather, I began to recognize my patterns. Go be whomever you want to be, then. Do whatever you want to do. Pursue whatever fascinates you and brings you to life. Create whatever you want to create and let it be stupendously imperfect, because it's exceedingly likely that nobody will even notice. And that's awesome. Love. My desire to work, my desire to engage with my creativity as intimately and as freely as possible is my strongest personal incentive to fight back against pain, by any means necessary, and to fashion a life for myself that is as sane and healthy and stable as it can possibly be. But that's only because of what I have chosen to trust, which is quite simply love. Love over suffering, always. Dress up. I always try to remind myself that I am having an affair with my creativity, and I make an effort to present myself to inspiration like somebody you might actually want to have an affair with, not like someone who's been wearing her husband's underwear around the house all week because she has totally given up. I put myself together from head to toe, from one end to the other of me, in Tristram Shandy's words, and then I get back to my task. It works every time. Honest to God, if I had a freshly powdered 18th century wig like Tristram's, I would wear it sometimes. Fake it till you make it is the trick. Dress for the novel you want to write is another way of saying it. Seduce the big magic and it will always come back to you the same way a raven is captivated by a shiny, spinning thing. Make time, even 30 minutes per day. I had read an interview with John Updike where he said that some of the best novels you've ever read were written in an hour a day. I figured I could always carve out at least 30 minutes somewhere to dedicate myself to my work, no matter what else was going on or how badly I believed the work was going. If you devote yourself to anything diligently for 10 years, that will make you an expert. That's the time it would take to earn 2 master's degrees and a doctorate. Even the most successful creative people I know complain that they never seem to get all the hours they need in order to engage in dreamy, pressure-free, creative exploration. Reality's demands are constantly pounding on the door and disturbing them. On some other planet, in some other lifetime, perhaps that sort of peaceful Edenic work environment does exist, but it rarely exists here on Earth. Melville never got that kind of environment, for instance. But he still somehow managed to write Moby Dick, anyhow. Sneak off and have an affair with your most creative self. Lie to everyone about where you're actually going on your lunch break. Pretend you're traveling on a business trip when secretly you're retreating in order to paint, or to write poetry, or to draw up the plans for your future organic mushroom farm. Conceal it from your family and friends, whatever it is you're up to. Slip away from everyone else at the party and go off to dance alone with your ideas in the dark. Wake yourself up in the middle of the night in order to be alone with your inspiration, while nobody is watching. You don't need that sleep right now, you can give it up. What else are you willing to give up in order to be alone with your beloved? The paradox. So let's give this one a try. The paradox that you need to comfortably inhabit, if you wish to live a contented creative life, goes something like this: my creative expression must be the most important thing in the world to me, if I am to live artistically, and it also must not matter at all, if I am to live sanely. Sanity. But if your calling is to make things, then you still have to make things in order to live out your highest creative potential and also in order to remain sane. Possessing a creative mind, after all, is something like having a border collie for a pet. It needs to work, or else it will cause you an outrageous amount of trouble. Give your mind a job to do, or else it will find a job to do, and you might not like the job it invents: eating the couch, digging a hole through the living room floor, biting the mailman, etc. It has taken me years to learn this, but it does seem to be the case that if I am not actively creating something, then I am probably actively destroying something: myself, a relationship, or my own peace of mind. I firmly believe that we all need to find something to do in our lives that stops us from eating the couch. Whether we make a profession out of it or not, we all need an activity that is beyond the mundane and that takes us out of our established and limiting roles in society: mother, employee, neighbor, brother, boss, etc. We all need something that helps us to forget ourselves for a while, to momentarily forget our age, our gender, our socio-economic background, our duties, our failures, and all that we have lost and screwed up. But creative living can do it, too. Perhaps creativity's greatest mercy is this: by completely absorbing our attention for a short and magical spell, it can relieve us temporarily from the dreadful burden of being who we are. Best of all, at the end of your creative adventure, you have a souvenir, something that you made, something to remind you forever of your brief but transformative encounter with inspiration. That's what my books are to me: souvenirs of journeys that I took, in which I managed blessedly to escape myself for a little while. An abiding stereotype of creativity is that it turns people crazy. I disagree. Not expressing creativity turns people crazy. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you don't bring forth what is within you, what you don't bring forth will destroy you. Gospel of Thomas. Bring forth what is within you, then, whether it succeeds or fails. Do it whether the final product, your souvenir, is crap or gold. Do it whether the critics love you or hate you, or whether the critics have never heard of you and perhaps never will hear of you. Do it whether people get it or don't get it. It doesn't have to be perfect, and you don't have to be Plato. It's all just an instinct and an experiment and a mystery, so begin. Begin anywhere. Preferably right now. And if greatness should ever accidentally stumble upon you, let it catch you hard at work. Hard at work, and sane. Advice to the students. I work either way, you see, assisted or unassisted, because that is what you must do in order to live a fully creative life. I work steadily, and I always thank the process. Whether I am touched by grace or not, I thank creativity for allowing me to engage with it at all. Because either way, it's all kind of amazing what we get to do, what we get to attempt, what we sometimes get to commune with. Gratitude, always. Always, gratitude. Instead of taking out loans to go to a school for the arts, maybe try to push yourself deeper into the world, to explore more bravely. Or go more deeply and bravely inward. Take an honest inventory of the education you already have, the years you have lived, the trials you have endured, the skills you have learned along the way. If you are older, trust that the world has been educating you all along. You already know so much more than you think you know. You are not finished, you are merely ready. After a certain age, no matter how you've been spending your time, you have very likely earned a doctorate in living. Do you want to study under the great teachers? Is that it? Well, you can find them anywhere. They live on the shelves of your library, they live on the walls of museums, they live in recordings made decades ago. Your teachers don't even need to be alive to educate you masterfully. No living writer has ever taught me more about plotting and characterization than Charles Dickens has taught me, and needless to say, I never met with him during office hours to discuss it. All I had to do in order to learn from Dickens was to spend years privately studying his novels like they were holy scripture. And then to practice like the devil on my own. Aspiring writers are lucky in a way, because writing is such a private, and cheap, affair, and always has been. Most of all, there is this truth: no matter how great your teachers may be, and no matter how esteemed your academy's reputation, eventually you will have to do the work by yourself. Eventually, the teachers won't be there anymore. The walls of the school will fall away, and you'll be on your own. The hours that you will then put into practice, study, auditions, and creation will be entirely up to you. The sooner and more passionately you get married to this idea that it is ultimately entirely up to you, the better off you'll be. This is unequivocal evidence that the world is a place of deep unfairness. Because look at the facts. Lois Rosenthal didn't want Elk Talk when it was submitted to her by an unknown author, but she did want it when it was submitted to her by a famous literary agent. Therefore, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Talent means nothing, and connections mean everything, and the world of creativity, like the greater world itself, is a mean and unfair place. If you want to see it that way, go right ahead. But I didn't see it that way. On the contrary, I saw it as another example of big magic, and, again, a witty one. I saw it as proof that you must never surrender, that no doesn't always mean no, and that miraculous turns of fate can happen to those who persist in showing up. Go be whomever you want to be, then. Do whatever you want to do. Pursue whatever fascinates you and brings you to life. Create whatever you want to create and let it be stupendously imperfect, because it's exceedingly likely that nobody will even notice. And that's awesome.